Welcome back to Backspace Academy. In this lecture on CloudFront, which is AWS's content delivery network, I'll talk about how CloudFront is used to cache regularly used content to edge locations located across AWS's global infrastructure. I'll talk about origin servers, which contain our content to be cached, and I'll talk about a CloudFront distribution, which defines what is to be cached and how it is to be cached. And I'll talk about dynamic content. How do we manage content to be cached that is changing on a regular basis? And finally, I'll talk about the options available to us for using CloudFront. CloudFront is a web service for high performance delivery of content. And it uses a worldwide network of data centers or edge locations to deliver that content with very low latency. It helps to reduce the number of hops that a request has to go to get the information that it requires. So we can see there on that diagram going from a requester to a server over the wider internet can take quite a significant route. So having a closer edge location will reduce the number of hops and obviously the latency in responding to requests. Edge locations are basically data centers that are located across the AWS infrastructure, and they provide a closer access and lower latency for our cached content to the end user. Currently, there are at least 50 edge locations. There's probably more than 100, I would think, at the time of this video. And those contain CloudFront distributions at those edge locations, and they enable us to have high performance delivery of that content. Looking at the picture of the globe there, we've got edge locations located in blue at January 2016, so quite a significant time ago. But clearly you can see there are a lot of edge locations available to cache our content. The CloudFront origin server will be the location of the content that we are going to be delivering across the CloudFront content delivery network. The origin server can be either an S3 bucket containing our content, or it can be a HTTP server. For example, it could be an EC2 instance. It can also be, it doesn't have to actually be on our AWS infrastructure, can actually be a web server that we manage outside of AWS. This is a case for web only, not RTMP CloudFront distributions, but we could have a web server outside of AWS, provided that CloudFront has access to that server. So if it's a publicly accessible content, then we can use that as a basis for our CloudFront distribution. So our CloudFront distribution, now that tells CloudFront which origin servers to get your files from and the time for that cache to live. CloudFront automatically assigns a domain name to your new distribution, and you can also define your own alternate domain name using Route 53 CNAME record entry. If an edge location contains a requested file within the time to live, it is delivered directly from the cache. If it is not, it is fetched from the origin server and then delivered and then cached at the edge location. If we want our content to be changed before that time to live has expired, we can do that. For example, if we've got new content we want to put out there and we want to make sure that our end users are getting the most current content, we can invalidate that distribution, or we can invalidate parts of that distribution. For example, directories within that distribution, or we could individual files, or we could actually use a wildcard signal, which could actually say, well, all of our HTML files we're going to update or invalidate. And that takes a certain amount of time. It takes quite a number of minutes for a distribution to be invalidated, then redistributed across the content delivery network. One concern that we need to understand is how do we manage dynamic content? So if we've got dynamic content and it's going to be cached and we've got a time to live of 1 day, is not necessarily going to be dynamic content anymore from a user's perspective. So the options available to us is that we can have a very, very low time to live, or we can actually not cache dynamic content, only the static content. And CloudFront makes it quite easy to do that because not all HTTP methods are cached by CloudFront, only responses to GET and HEAD requests. Although you can also configure CloudFront to cache responses to options requests also. If we use a different HTTP method, such as post, put, or delete, those requests will not be cached by CloudFront. They will be simply proxy back to our origin server. So that's how we could allow our static content to be cached and our dynamic content to be proxied back directly to our origin server. So we can combine dynamic and static content in that way. So just finally, I just wanted to go through the CloudFront options or the options that are available from a strategy perspective of how we could use CloudFront for different scenarios. So the first thing there is we might have a static site, and that could be a HTML5 website that doesn't change, or it is not a dynamic site. So we could have our HTML, our CSS, and our code. We could have that located on, for example, an origin server on S3. And we could have that not cached with CloudFront. So we could keep that separate from CloudFront, and we could use CloudFront just to cache our big files, our images, our videos, our documents, our code libraries, our jQuery libraries and that sort of thing. And that way we're still getting the benefits of CloudFront because all of our videos and this big stuff is not going to be fetched back from our server, or we're not going to get these costs from Amazon S3 servers for bandwidth for using it. So the advantage of that, it also allows for us to easily update our site. So we're going to get the benefits of CloudFront there, but at the same time, if we've got HTML web pages, we can quickly update those quite straightforward. And same if we're going to update it, do any code updates, we can update those without having to invalidate our CloudFront distribution and go through all that time of doing that. The disadvantage is going to be the latency of those HTML, CSS, and those files that are going to be accessed directly. So another option for static websites would be to have nothing going direct and have CloudFront doing all of our static content. So everything on the site going through to or being in a CloudFront distribution. That obviously is going to give us a best performance from a latency perspective. So from a user perspective, we're going to get the lowest latency. The disadvantage of that will be if your site is going to be changing on a regular basis, so every day you're making changes to your site, then that's going to require you to invalidate that site and invalidate that CloudFront distribution. And that's going to take time, and that's going to take time for that to propagate across those edge locations as well. So then we can look at a dynamic site. For example, we might have a WordPress site, a PHP site, or whatever. So we could look at going direct with our dynamic pages. As we said, we could do our different types of post commands and whatever that to actually have our dynamic pages being proxied through to the origin server, not cached by CloudFront, and then have our images, video, documents, all those large static files located on or cached through CloudFront. That's going to give us the advantages that we're going to have the most up-to-date content delivered. We're going to have our static content delivered with low latency, and we're also going to have our dynamic pages delivered with the most up-to-date content. The disadvantage is going to be the latency of those PHP files. And also we're still going to be having traffic going through to that server. So we're going to, we might have a large hit of traffic, and so we need to accommodate that. So the next option is that we can have everything going through CloudFront for our dynamic and our static page. It's going to give us great low latency. It's going to massively reduce the load on our web server, because all of those requests will be going straight to CloudFront, and the only requests will be coming from the CloudFront service to invalidate or update the distribution. The disadvantage is that the TTL, the time to live, will need to be low, but it needs to be low enough to balance between having reasonably current content, so a low content age, but at the same time balancing between that and having the load on your origin server. So if the CloudFront service is continually going back and updating its distribution, then that's going to, at the same time, put a load on your server. So that's all I will discuss for now on CloudFront. We have a lab on HTML5 websites and using CloudFront in front of that. So I'll look forward to seeing you in that lab.